Okay, so this is for chapter 2 in Favale, the Genesis of Gender. It begins with the Babylonian creation or creation myth. We'll talk about myth here in a second. But what she does is she's going to contrast the Babylonian, destructive, divisive, everybody out for themselves, chaotic, crazy gods, no value, no meaning, no purpose, Babylonian myth. Compare that to the biblical description of where gender comes from. So this is actually a really important chapter because she'll sort of play off of this in the rest of the book. Here's how the world does things, and here's how the Bible does things. So she's not, you might wonder, why is she going into Babylon? Well, I think her point is just that this Babylonian chaotic creation idea is retained even in the modern era. So even though people don't believe in what's the guy's name? Even though people don't believe now in Enuma Elish and Marduk and all that kind of stuff, those kinds of things are secular left-wing creation story is much the same. And so it's out of that comes the worldly, radical feminist gender paradigm. And so so she wants to kind of keep that in your mind as you read the rest of the book. And then she'll then talk about, in this chapter, she talks about then how the Bible accounts for gender and how much more beautiful it is. So think of that as you're reading through this chapter. How does the world see it? How does the Bible depict it? And notice how the Bible has an all-powerful God, one God. He's good. He creates things that are good out of order. He takes chaos in the first couple of verses of Genesis 1. He takes chaos and turns it into order. There's purpose. There's value. He creates things and he says, that's good. So there's inherent value and worth to it. There's meaning. There's purpose. He gives creation purpose. So just on down the line, when the Babylonian myth says this, Genesis says that, and just contrast the two. So I want to just spend a couple minutes on the idea of myth, because people think about myth today, how we often use myth today as being like untrue, like a fable. And that's not really how many scholars use the term myth. To many scholars, myth just means it's a story that we tell, and it may be true or it may not be. It's just a story that we tell. So think of the American Revolution, and there's a certain facts about the Boston Tea Party, about the siege of Boston, about the battles. This battle happened this day. This battle happened that day. On down the line, there's a series of facts, and what we do is we take those facts and we say, this is the story of patriotic Americans, rugged, resourceful, brave, sacrificial Americans fighting against tyranny. That is, in a sense, our national creation myth. When you use that term, it doesn't mean that that's wrong. It's not like no, we were not resourceful, we were not patriotic, and we didn't fight the tyrannical British. It's just that that's making meaning out of something, and so there's no judgment as to whether it's true or not. So notice how she says this is true myth. The Genesis gives us true myth. So there's these facts, and then out of that comes this sense of all these things that we say. God is a God of goodness, that that He creates order and that sort of thing. Now, if you're still bothered by that, I don't really like to use the term myth either. It doesn't really, even though I say, okay, so this is what, she's using the term myth in terms of like meaning, not facts, but still, I'd rather and she says it's true myth, so it's true meaning, and yet I still rather her be a little bit stronger in saying, no, Genesis 1 and 2 actually happened. But whatever. I think one reason why I think she's uses this term and says it the way she does is because she doesn't want to get into this debate, probably with secular people, as to is it a 6-day creation and is it old Earth, new Earth? She just kind of puts that aside and wants us to put it aside and not get all bogged down in that kind of thing. It just says, look, these are just true meanings that come out of Genesis 1 and 2. Let's forget about the scientific stuff and just focus on the story that is being told and the values that we can get, the meaning and values that we can get from the story. So hopefully that makes sense and is okay with you. I wouldn't get too hung up on it. Okay, then on page 40, he talks about, this is crucial, page 40 and 41 are really crucial for her story because she talks about the creation of man as man, masculine, male, man, and then how female is created, and their bodies are built for true communion. Okay, you notice in the Babylonian story, women are kind of a problem, and it's a really gory story about how women come to be. Well, here is a beautiful story of how women was created from man. They are complementary. They go together, and their bodies in a sense are a gift to each other. So as she says, our bodies then serve a sacramental function by revealing and communicating a spiritual reality. All right, this is really important. Sacrament means like a religious spiritual function. We don't, in the AC Church, we don't really talk so much about sacraments, and I think that's unfortunate, but be that as it may, a sacrament means there's something physical going on, but it does something spiritual. All right, and so what does the body do? Our bodies reveal something spiritual, something within us. So I'm a male, so my body reveals that I am male. My body is me, my maleness is me, my genetics are me, all that is me. And so, but my body reveals my gender, and the female body reveals a female gender. And together they are gifts to each other, and they go together, and it's a beautiful thing. So what Adam does then is he names, on page 42, he names then the animals, and he names the woman. There's probably a lot we can say about naming and the ancient practice of naming, but what she wants to point out here is that God created male and female. Adam just named them. All right, so she wants to point something out about language. The way it is in the Bible, God creates reality, and we just identify it. We just name it. As you go through the chapter, she begins to talk about how language becomes a problem in today's world. All right, and she'll talk about this even, as she goes through this book. She'll talk about how we have the idea that we, by naming something, we can create reality. So, for instance, if I decide actually I'm a woman, I just declare I am a woman, and everybody has to accept now that I'm a woman. And so we have taken the prerogative, the power of God, and ascribed it to ourselves. We think we can create reality out of our own language. And that is God's prerogative. God speaks things into existence, and by his word, he makes reality happen. And so he made male and female. All we did is just identify it. Our words, in other words, are not creative. They don't actually make things. They just label things. All we can do is label things. So, in other words, our modern day belief that we can speak things into reality is really problematic. And it doesn't reflect reality because we don't have that power. Okay, and then in the last page, 52, she says, within this redemptive order, we can recover our wonder. We can recognize anew the abundance of the gift of our bodies, the gift of our shared humanity, and the gift of our sexual difference. So, I guess the main thing here out of this chapter is just to see two key things. One is the worldly creation myth and how that happens, and then the Genesis creation story and how that happens. And then the rest of the book, there's going to be a battle between the two, in essence. And then also this thing about language, how in the Bible it is presented that all we do is name what God creates, as opposed to today, we think that we can create things like God does. We can create things through our speech, and that's a bad idea. And out of that, then, something else that we should notice is she also begins to talk about how now in modern day we see ourselves as sort of separate from our bodies. So instead of seeing our bodies as reflecting something inward, something spiritual, something inward, we pit our real selves here as a kind of the spiritual soul, kind of who I think I am, against our bodies. And so if my body, if I feel like I'm female, but my body is male, well then my body has to come into subjection to my spirit, to my emotions, to my feelings, because my body isn't in the world around me. My body isn't really me. What I think, what I feel, that's me. My body is like out here and it's opposed to it, so I have to overcome it or change it or manipulate it, do surgery on it to make it fit who I really am. And that is opposed to Genesis, which says, no, God created you as a whole body, soul, spirit, and he identifies you as male or female, and it's a gift and it's beautiful. It creates order out of chaos, and we are complementary, male and female, and it's a beautiful thing. So that is chapter 2.